Hello friends, welcome to Coding Garden with CJ. Welcome to an episode where we talk about software development and how to work on teams. We're going to talk about Agile, Scrum, working in teams, Git workflow, feature branching, code reviews, development environments. It's going to be great. Welcome to the stream. Let's say hello to all the wonderful people in the chat. Hello Amadou, welcome to the stream. Hello Bubar. Hello Felix. Hello Mo. Hello Raj. Hello Rabbitworks, welcome, welcome. Josh says they have to do some grocery shopping, but they'll watch it later. That's great. Hello Isaac. Hello Takadine. Hello Andrew Lane. Hello Felix, who has a question. I'll answer it before we get started. Hello Brian, welcome to the stream. Hello Rabia. Hello Alex. Hello Wally Oxen. Hello Simjon. Good evening, morning, and day, wherever you are. Same. Hello, my name is Nobody. Hello Schmucky. Hello Alvaro. There's so many people. So many people. Hello Defying Blueprints says, nice topic. I hope it goes well. I will mention it in a second, but this will be slightly unstructured for the live stream, but I am going to edit down into smaller targeted videos afterwards. So we'll see how that goes. Hello Zimba, welcome to the stream. Hello Skelly. Hello Julian, welcome. Hello Khalil. Asks, how are you? I'm doing okay. I had a breakfast sandwich this morning. Got my yerba mate tea, ready to go. Hello Ahmed. Hello Jake. Hello Bob's Paradox, welcome, welcome. Hello, Senkar. Hello, Brian. Hello, Mohammed. Hello, Sarit. Hello, Jake. And there is another Mohammed. Hello. Okay, so these are the topics we're going to cover. And as I mentioned, it's going to be a little bit unstructured for the live stream. I'm going to I didn't have enough time to prepare. So during the live stream, I'll gather the materials. Then I'll do just once I have everything, a set 5-10 minute thing on that given thing, and then afterwards I'm going to edit it down and the world can watch it. But the main reason that I'm making videos like this is because we have started the Coding Garden community app. So this is an app that's being built by the Coding Garden people, by the Coding Garden community, by the people watching this stream right now. And oh yeah, Andrew mentioned there's a question. I'll get back to it. I want to get the intro. Why am I doing this video? So, as a community, we are building an app. There are various people that have signed up earlier on. We started this probably at the end of last year, and so there are various people that have become core contributors and making sure that everything is getting in line. A lot of what we've been doing is just planning, how are we going to build this thing? What tech are we going to use? What workflow are we going to use? All of that good stuff. So we've been planning all of that, but now development is starting, and we're using some of these things that I'm going to be talking about. So I want to make videos so that new people coming into the project can get a little bit of background on this stuff, and then also especially Git workflow and feature branching, because part of contributing to this project would be using these things or participating in these things. So knowing what they are, knowing how to do them, and I'll give an example of, I have a specific feature or story that I'm working on. How would I go about adding it to our code base? And so we have a mobile app. It is a React Native app. We have a backend that's going to be built with Express. And then if you want to know more about this project, you can look at the wiki. Go into the wiki, and it just describes what we're building, what our tech stack is. We have contribution guidelines, code of conduct, how you can get involved. You can see the Trello board, all that good stuff. So if you're interested, check it out. And now I will answer a question that was in the chat. And yeah, I'll share this getting involved piece here. And so as I mentioned earlier, we do have core contributors. So there's roughly, I think maybe close to 20 people that signed on early and then have participated in the meetings, and they're gonna kind of help steward the project. But anyone else is totally welcome to contribute as well. We'll talk about how that will work exactly, because we are using a Trello board to manage all of the work that we have, and we have a Discord where we chat and we discuss how we're going to do things and things like that. But if you are interested, you can read this and get caught up. So there was a question, totally unrelated, but that's fine, from Felix, who says, thoughts on web development in Windows 7. And I guess you're saying Windows 7 specifically, but maybe also like Windows 10. I think it's doable. I'll tell you the reason I like to develop on a Mac is because it is Linux or like Unix based. So on a Mac, you can use a terminal, and all of the Unix commands for like traversing directories and managing processes and working with small programs and piping and stuff like that, all of that just works out of the box. And a lot of development tools out there are built for Linux, but they work for Mac also because they were built for Linux. So that's why I prefer to work on a Mac. On Windows 7, you can install this thing called there's Cygwin, which gives you Unix-like commands that you can use in Windows. And then there's also, if you install the Git shell, it has a lot of the Unix commands as well. Now, that doesn't mean you're running on a Linux system, but you have access to those things. And then if you're using Windows, I think it's Windows 10, maybe Windows 8 supports it, but it has the Ubuntu subsystem, so you can actually run Linux inside of your Windows machine. So that's why I like Mac. It's totally doable to write, build web apps on Windows. I just prefer to use Mac. So those are my thoughts. And other people in the chat, feel free to chime in as to your thoughts on coding on Windows. I've thought about I've thought about making setup videos and like how to do the things that I'm doing on Windows, because I know a lot of people out there are using Windows, but I really just prefer Mac. My mouse is not sharing. Just a second. This is not good. Because I have a separate computer and my mouse is supposed to work on both. Give me one moment while I figure this out. There's my mouse. Okay. This question from Joe. I'm gonna get into the. Okay. Mouse is working again. I'll save this question for later because maybe we can get to it at the end. Questions. Okay. Simon says, looking forward to how you do this. Me too. There's a few people that have joined. Hello, Mohammed. Hello, Satya. Hello, CM. Hello, Saeed. Hello, Allegrebi. Hello, Allegrebi. Hello, Daniel. Hello, Himanshu. Yes, and someone asked how to join the community. I shared the wiki that describes what we're doing and how to get involved and stuff like that. And I guess I should also mention, we did a live stream a few weeks ago, maybe a month ago. If you look in the recent streams, Coding Garden Community App Planning Meeting. So this is where I met with some of the core contributors, and we just talked about our process and how we're going to do things and who's going to do what and that kind of thing. So you can check out that stream as well. Cool. Jake is asking about GitLab. I don't have any specific tips for GitLab. I do like it, though. I have used it in the past. Yeah, and Malik is mentioning in Windows, you can also use PowerShell. So PowerShell is a scripting language specifically for Windows, but you can do similar things that you would be able to do in the Unix terminal. My only comment about that is a lot of the things you find online are specifically built for like running in a Linux environment. So it just works with Mac, and that's why I prefer it. Yeah. Okay. Hello, Sergi. Welcome to the stream. Hello, Pramjit. Hello, Lamstead Gaming. There's a lot of people here today. Welcome, welcome. Okay, so how are we going to do this? Let's first talk about Agile software development. Now, as I mentioned, I'm going to break this down into like separate edited videos. So let's figure out how I'm going to do that. It's going to get a little meta. I don't know. Maybe I'll do an introduction a couple of times. But let's talk about Agile. I definitely want to talk about the Agile manifesto. I also want to talk about just like Agile in quotes. Like, what does it mean to be Agile? So many places call themselves Agile or say they're doing Agile, but are they really Agile? And then we'll talk about flavors of Agile. I don't know if that's the best term for it, but I'm talking like XP, Scrum, Kanban, Lean, those types of things. Cool. Let's get into it. All right, Agile software development. What is it? We can go to Wikipedia and we can read Agile software development is an approach to software development under which requirements and solutions evolve through the collaboration effort of self-organizing and cross-functional teams and their customers and end users. Now, little history lesson. Where did this all start? Back in 2001, a group of software developers got together at, I think it was like a winter retreat in Utah, and they came up with the manifesto for Agile software development. This is the thing that kind of started it all. This is what I believe like created the word Agile in conjunction with software development. So let's read the manifesto for Agile software development. We are uncovering better ways of developing software by doing it and helping others do it. Through this work, we have come to value individuals and interactions over processes and tools, working software over comprehensive documentation, customer collaboration over contract negotiation, responding to change over following a plan. That is, while there is value in the items on the right, we value the items on the left more. And that really is the key point here. And the reason something like this even came about is because a lot of companies that do software development don't really focus on individuals and interactions or like actually working software and working features that an end user can use. A lot of companies typically use or follow a paradigm called waterfall, where you basically just do things in steps. And one thing comes after the other, and the next thing can't start until the other thing is finished. So you would see companies spending half a year or a year just documenting and coming up with requirements for what they were going to build without ever building it. And what this is saying is, sure, we can have that, but what if we just do a little bit at a time? What if we come up with some general requirements and then just have a go at it and try building it? And that allows us to uncover even more and allows us to build ultimately better software that is better fitted for the user who even asked for the software. Customer collaboration over contract negotiation. Whereas you can have a contract in place, but just know that there's going to be back and forth. This isn't just going to be a company or like let's say somebody wants your company to build software for them and they give you a contract and just says, okay, build this thing for me. We'll see you again in a year. That just doesn't work because the software developers, the product team needs to uncover requirements. They need to collaborate with the customer to really figure out what they should be building. And then this last one, responding to change over following a plan. There are unknown unknowns. There are things that are going to happen that you are not going to expect. And instead of just continually following the plan that you had from the beginning, you need to be able to respond to that and adjust to it. So that's the general underlying thing of Agile software development. And you can take this in so many different ways, and people have. I just do want to point out, like, the names that were signed here are very prevalent in, like, book writers and in the Agile community. Like, Kent Beck did the Design Patterns book. Robert C. Martin, that's Uncle Bob, and he did Clean Code. Andrew Hunt, and maybe someone else did The Pragmatic Programmer. Andrew Hunt and Dave Thomas, I believe, did Pragmatic Programmer. Like, all of these people are very prevalent in the Agile community. They've written books. They're great. And then this is extended a little bit more. There are the 12 principles of Agile software. I'm not going to read these, but basically they got together, they put this thing together, and we've been off to the races since then. In my notes here, I have Agile in quotes because a lot of companies might say they're doing Agile or say, oh, we're an Agile company, but it really has just become a bit of a buzzword. And it's more about creating like highly functional teams that work really well together and can get things done. And if that's not happening, you're probably not Agile. And then there are lots of flavors of Agile. So one of the first ones, this XP, is called Extreme Programming. And I believe this has been around before the Agile Manifesto came out. Yeah. if you look at origins, software development in the 90s was shaped by two major influences. Internally, and object-oriented programming replaced procedural programming. But yeah, so XP has been around since about 99 or so. And this is where a lot of the things that come in to things like Scrum were actually invented. So you have release planning, you have iteration planning, acceptance testing, stand-up meetings, pair negotiation, unit testing, pair programming, and it all works in a cycle or a loop. So when I talk about Scrum, you'll see how it has these cycles, and it's basically just a play on the things that they came up with in extreme programming. As I mentioned, there's Scrum, there's Kanban, there's lean software development. So there's all these things, and they all have really great ideas, and they're not just set in stone, this is how you build software. They are general ideas, and they have various reasons for why they have those specific ideas or ways of doing things. And if your team, if your company doesn't have those requirements, then maybe you don't have to follow those things. So these are not strict set of rules that must be followed. They are guidelines which will help your team build better software. And I say that because, like, at work, we kind of do a mix of all of these. So we do a little bit of XP because we have like pair programming and unit tests. We do Scrum because we have daily stand-ups and we try to have less than 2-week iterations. We take principles from lean software development because we harp on MVP, which is minimum viable product. We have Kanban boards, which really are iteration boards. All I'm saying is there's a ton of stuff. You can call it one thing, but at the end of the day, it's under this Agile umbrella. So that is what Agile is. And for the Coding Garden community app, we are doing it in a bit of an Agile way in terms of how we've planned this thing, how we're actually building out features. Now, the Coding Garden community app is unique in that we're not a team that's all working together in the same location. We live all around the world. We're in different time zones. And people are really just volunteering, so it's not full-time work. So we've made some adjustments, whereas there isn't exactly a daily stand-up, but we're still picking and choosing from it so that it will work with our team. So that is Agile software development. The next video will be talking specifically about Scrum. See you there. How did I do? I'm going to edit that. That's going to be a part of the edited video. Okay, let me catch up on the chat. Do-do-do-do. World says Dave Thomas was the owner of Wendy's. I think that's a different Dave Thomas. Nino says, okay, now explain that again. I missed it. You can go watch the video. And actually, I mentioned it earlier. I am going to edit that part down. That's going to be the one video on Agile, and you can just watch that 10-minute video or however long it is. Cool. Yeah, and actually, I do want to talk a bit about waterfall. So Daniel says, waterfall methodology used to work as IT development and was not as rapid as it is now. So actually, I want to talk about that. Maybe this will be like a footnote to talk about waterfall. So you can kind of compare it to Agile. Okay, let's find like a nice like waterfall software development image. Because there's a very interesting thing about waterfall. Very, very interesting. The original paper that it was based on, he essentially was talking about it being in an Agile way. He was like, so while you have this waterfall method, it should be done in iterations, and you should constantly look back at what you've done and not build things for like a year before talking to a customer to see if that's what they actually wanted. But let's talk about waterfall. So waterfall. This is another software development paradigm that you see is pretty common out there, where essentially things are done in stages and it kind of flows like a waterfall. A lot of people refer to this as big design up front. So the first step of it is requirements. So you essentially gather all the requirements that you can from the customer, from the person that you're building the software for. Everything. You try to ask them as much as possible, what piece of software do you want us to build? What are all the do's, the don'ts, the business rules? We're going to gather all of that up front. And then we're going to take those requirements and turn it into some sort of software design. So given these business rules and requirements, how can we actually build a piece of software with it? Then once we have that design, we start to implement it. And we basically have the full fledged out design where you can go from this is the design to this is how we actually write it with code. Then after you've implemented it, you run it through verification or like quality assurance. Basically, people will use it, find any bugs, make sure it behaves as the requirements says it should, and then you release that piece of software. And then after that, there's a maintenance cycle. So bugs are found or new features need to be added, and so that's added in as well. But this is very like top-down flow. And as I mentioned, the person that actually wrote the very first description of waterfall, Winston Royce, in his document that talked about waterfall, he says that you should actually run this in shorter iterations. So maybe like a couple of weeks or a month, where this whole process takes place in a month. And then a month later, you reevaluate. What went well, what didn't go well, and let's make sure that the requirements we gathered before are still the same. They still make sense after putting this piece of software in front of the user, and then you do it all over again. And that's essentially describing Agile. So, but people have taken this and just ran with it, and you'll see a lot of companies do this, where basically they'll go an entire year, 2 years, 3 years building a piece of software before ever putting it in front of a user, putting it in front of the customer to actually try it and use it. And the thing is, and pretty much why something like the Agile Manifesto came about, was requirements change. Like a user could ask, or a customer could ask for you to build something, you build it for them, but the moment you put it in front of them, then they realize, oh, this isn't exactly how I wanted it to be, or now that I use it, I'm thinking of another way that I might want to use it. So if you wait years before you even show it to them, you're going to have a really hard time like modifying that software or changing it. Whereas if you're doing it in short iterations, short cycles, and you're constantly getting feedback, you're building better software as you go along, and it's actually something that the end user, the customer, wants. So that's waterfall in conjunction with Agile. Thanks for watching. Cool. Yeah, someone said so much planning and workflow ideas and principles. Like, the thing is, because there's no one good way, and I don't think there can be a good way. I think it depends on the team. I think it depends on just so many factors that you can't just have, like, this is how we're going to build software, or this is how we're going to run a project. It needs to be adjustable and variable. But I think there are good things that can be done, like a feedback cycle, really just analyzing how you work and making sure it's effective, making sure you're producing business value with the things that you build, and that's a lot of what goes into Agile as well. You're doing things from a user perspective. It's not a development perspective, or like, yeah, it's nothing like that. You're building things so that an end user, a customer, can have a working piece of software that is valuable to them. Cool. Yeah, Nino is saying 10% of people implement any of this correctly. Yeah, Simjohn is saying, reminds me of coding train live streams. That's the style that I'm trying to do. Like, you have a specific thing, then we can talk about it, and then I'll go back and edit it, and you won't see the talking or the stuff. ResMed, and now the next video. Simon says, you did very well. Your presentation skills are excellent. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Bob's Paradox is saying, I had to draw that waterfall diagram on a test. That's what's also interesting. So I got a computer science degree, and even learning about computer science in school, they like barely mentioned Agile. So I graduated back in 2011. So this was 8 years ago. But even back then, getting a computer science degree, you're not learning like the way to build software. I know there are like specializations, like you can get a degree in computer science with a specialization in software engineering, and there you might actually talk about project management and how to work on an Agile team and stuff like that. But in some schools, they are literally teaching that waterfall is the way to build software. I don't know. It's a thing. Yeah, and Seven is saying, which one is the best for developing small-scale projects, Agile or Waterfall? I think Agile. And the thing is, even if you do decide to do Waterfall, there should be some sort of feedback cycle built in. Like, you should build things for a week, have some features that can actually be usable and testable, and then put that in front of people or customers, end users, to see if what you built actually works and is actually what they wanted. Because this idea of waterfall typically is you just build the whole thing and then put it in front of users. And by the time like a year goes by or 2 years goes by, things change, the world changed. The world is moving so fast. So if you did it waterfall, then you would most likely just have to rebuild that thing, or you'd have a very hard time modifying it. So whatever you do, have some sort of feedback cycle built into it. Yeah, and so Simon is saying the need of a customer changes in time from what they thought they needed to the start of the project. And this is the other thing, like, there are some misconceptions about Agile, because in the software world, there's this idea of, like, scope creep or changing requirements, whereas you set out to build a specific piece of software, but then all of a sudden the customer says, oh, well, I really need it to do this, or, oh, it would be really great if it did this. And in the waterfall world, it's really hard to integrate those requirements. I mean, you basically just have to take what you've already built and say, okay, we'll do those things now, and then add it onto your big list of things that you need to do. But with something like Agile, if you have short iterations, at the end of every iteration, you can talk to the customer and saying, is this what you wanted? And then you can say, okay, over the next iteration, this is what we're going to build. Is this what's most important to you, or have your requirements changed? So, and that's more the Scrum way of doing it in iterations. I don't know. It's all this stuff. It's all Agile. Yeah. Ambition is saying you'll probably regret having to spend time editing videos later. It ain't no thing. It's for the benefit of the community. Basically, I want new people to be able to come into this project and understand what we're doing and how we're doing it. And in the long run, it's going to save us time because we won't have to like onboard everybody that comes into it. Isaac is saying, I have a degree in software development. They talked about Agile, but we never did Agile. The teaching methodology they used was not very good. Very few students passed. And I think that's the thing. You can't just teach Agile. Like, I guess I'll start talking about Scrum. And then I'll make sure to make a clear delineation of like where the video starts or whatever. But, okay, Scrum is a thing. And Scrum is a bit more laid out than just this umbrella Agile term. Like, Scrum has specific roles that people should play on the development team. It has a specific way you should do things. And while it does have all of those things, just because you learned about them or read about them doesn't mean you know Scrum. Like, to really understand these things, you have to work on a team. You have to be in an environment where the principles of Scrum and Agile are at play so that you can understand why they're at play. Because if you just learn them like book style, where you're like, okay, these are the things, X, Y, Z, now I'm going to go off into the world and build software, it just doesn't work because nothing is ever that clear cut. Is there a Scrum cycle image thing? This thing, yes. The Scrum framework. And the Scrum process. Cool. So yeah. Cool. Robin from India says, look forward to your suggestions on branching and get tips on working as a team. I hope to get there soon. So we're going to talk about Scrum now. Then we'll just talk about general team stuff, and then we'll get into Git. So yeah, within the next few minutes, we'll get into it. All right, let's talk about Scrum. So Scrum is a specific framework, methodology, other words I could use that probably aren't correct, thing in Agile. So it's under the Agile umbrella. I mentioned Agile is a larger term and there's stuff underneath it, and Scrum is one of them. And this is the way it works. And essentially what they've done is they've kind of formalized the process of, like, if we look back at the Agile Manifesto, individuals and interactions over processes and tools, working software over comprehensive documentation, responding to change over following a plan, like, all of these things embody what is happening in this Scrum workflow. So first, it all starts with the product backlog. The product backlog is the list of all of the things the customer could ever think to want, at least right now. So these are things that may not make it into the software for like a year or so, but it's basically everything. So prior to having the product backlog, there were very large meetings where the Scrum team, the actual customer got into a room and really talked about what software needed to be built. And things got defined at a higher level, typically as user stories. And so this product backlog could have hundreds and hundreds of user stories, but it's basically just everything that could be built in this piece of software. And it's important to note that it is also prioritized. So while there is this huge list of all the things that need to be built, the things that are at the top are the highest priority in terms of what brings the most business value. And then from a development perspective, like what needs to be in place in terms of architecture and design before other things can be put into place. And so things are prioritized. You have this big long list, and then you go into the sprint planning meeting. In the sprint planning meeting, you're planning your next sprint. So sprints can vary by team. It could be 1 week, 2 weeks, 3 weeks, maybe 4 weeks. Sprint really says your sprints, or sorry, Scrum really says that your sprints should be no longer than 4 weeks, no longer than a month, because the longer they get, the longer you're going without feedback and without information about what you've done and validation about what you've done from the customer. So your iterations are typically under 4 weeks. All of the teams I've been on have pretty much done 2-week iterations, but it varies. If you're on a team and they have 6-month iterations, then they are not Agile. They're calling themselves Agile, but they are not Agile. I will just say that right now. Okay. So, but leading into this sprint, you have the sprint planning meeting, and your focus is, okay, going into this, what are we going to build? And typically you take the highest priority things out of the backlog and say, okay, these 5 stories, this is what we're going to build in this iteration. Now, that's a very informal way of saying it, but typically if you're on a team that has done several iterations, after each iteration, you get a much better idea of what your team can actually accomplish. So going into the sprint planning meeting, you can say, well, we know last sprint, we have the last sprint with the same team that we have now, we were able to complete 20 story points. So we can reliably say that going into this sprint, we can choose stories that add up to about 20 story points. Story points is another concept that I haven't really touched on, but it's a way of sizing stories, not in terms of hours, but in terms of relative complexity. So you have these size stories, you go into the planning meeting and say, okay, we're going to do this stuff for this specific sprint. You also talk about like, what is your goal for the sprint? And it's typically something that's like end user focused. So by the end of the sprint, we want users to be able to list all of the items in their shopping cart. Like that's the goal for the sprint, and all of the work is going to be leading towards that goal. Great. You then have the sprint backlog. So the sprint backlog is a much smaller list, but it's a list of things that are going to be done in that sprint. And then you have your iterations. So on a daily basis, you have your daily Scrum, which is basically a 10-minute meeting. And it's not exactly a status report. So this is where some misconceptions in Scrum can come into play, where developers say like, oh, a meeting every single day. No, this is like, you just got your coffee, you're all standing in a circle, and everyone is on the same page about where the project is and who's going to be working on what. So typically you answer 3 questions. What did you do yesterday? What are you going to do today? And do you have any blockers? So part of this stand-up is to get that quick update from everyone on the team in like less than 10 minutes. And typically the person in charge of making sure it only lasts 10 minutes is the Scrum Master. So the Scrum Master makes sure things are flowing. And then after those 10 minutes, we can talk more in detail about blockers. So that's basically, okay, I'm working on the front end today, but I really need this API to exist. And so I'm kind of waiting on the backend team to get that done, and I can't move forward until that gets done. That would be one of my updates for blockers. And then the Scrum Master knows, okay, I need to make sure I get you in contact with this person. We're going to work out all those blocks. But that happens after the Scrum. So the Scrum is quick updates. Scrum Master makes note of any blockers. Anyone that didn't have any blockers or that isn't involved in that can go off and do their work for the day. And anyone that did have blockers, we're going to try to unblock them and get them connected with the people they want to get connected with. So that happens on a daily basis. And you're also actually building things and all that good stuff. And then at the end of the sprint, however long it is, you have a potentially releasable increment or a potentially usable piece of software, meaning all the features in the sprint backlog got implemented. We now have something we're ready to show the customer, and most likely there are features in this that the customer can use and benefit from and start to give us feedback on. You have a meeting that is a sprint review, so you just talk about what did we get done in the sprint, And then you also have a retrospective where you are more self-critical. So typically in the retrospectives I've been a part of, we ask 3 questions. What should we start doing? What should we stop doing? And what should we continue doing? So as a team, you're very self-critical in terms of like how you worked together, how the planning meeting went going into this sprint, how effective were we in removing blockers. You just try to be really, really self-critical so that going into the next sprint, you're a better team. And typically coming out of the retrospective, you have action items. You say, okay, last sprint, we weren't as effective in communicating blockers. So a goal for this sprint is we're going to try to be much more effective in communicating those things. So really, it's just a feedback cycle. Then it just goes back to the beginning. You had your retrospective, then you go back and you plan your next sprint meeting. One thing that also happens is product backlog refinement. So because requirements might be changing or what the customer requires might change, this big backlog of stories gets shuffled around. Like, we say, okay, in the last sprint, we implemented these things, but we actually realized that this other feature would be a higher priority. So we're going to move that up in the backlog. And so that's happening in the background so that going into the next sprint planning meeting, you're still on the same page about what should be developed going into the sprint planning meeting. Cool. That's this cycle, this flow. There are some variations on it. You'll see some other images out there. I do like this more like simplified one. You've got your product backlog. That's everything that will or could ever be developed. Your sprint backlog, that's just what you're going to be writing in this sprint. You then have your iteration, which is 30 days or less. And then on a 24-hour basis, you have stand-up or your Scrum meeting. And at the end of it all, you have a working increment of software. That is the Scrum process. I think one last thing I want to mention on Scrum is roles. Because in Scrum, these are like very specific. In Scrum, you typically have the product owner. And the product owner is essentially the customer representative. Here it says they are the voice of the customer. So this is typically someone that's at your company and on your team, but they are kind of the liaison and they represent the customer's best interests. So as a developer, you should be able to talk to the product owner and have a question about, well, what does the customer want? I have this specific requirement, but there are a couple ways I could go about it. I could go to the product owner and ask them, and I would hope that they would give me an answer that is on behalf of the customer. Now, that doesn't replace talking to the customer directly, but it does help having someone on your team that is closer to the customer than maybe your development team is. So that's the product owner. This is different than a project manager. Like, a lot of people confuse product owner, project manager. You could have a product owner that is the project manager, though there could be some conflicts of interest there. I think one of the main things and one of the main reasons they have this role in Scrum is that you need someone who is a customer representative. It isn't someone who's just going to be focusing on development or focusing on other things. They are focusing on and representing the customer, the person we are building this piece of software for. Okay, the other thing is the development team. So these are all the people that are working on the software. A lot of times you might have full stack developers, but I've worked on teams where we have like 2 front-end developers, 2 back-end developers, 1 QA person. QA is quality assurance. And so basically you have your team, and these are the people that are actually writing the software. And it's typically a small team. So this here says 3 to 9 members. You don't want a really big team. You want a team that can effectively communicate and work together. And it really is the larger the team, the more lines of communication there are, meaning the longer things take, the longer it takes to onboard people or communicate people or find the person you need that knows something that you need to know. So we try to keep these teams pretty small. And you typically see that it's self-organizing or cross-functional, whereas you might have like team leads or like a technical lead, but at the end of the day, everyone knows what their role is and they're doing everything they can to get that done. They're not being like micromanaged or anything like that. And then you also have the Scrum Master. So this is the person that makes sure everything is going smoothly in stand-up. They make sure that stand-up only lasts 10 minutes. They make sure to get people unblocked. And they're basically just facilitating the team and making sure that it's running as like a nice, well-oiled machine. The Scrum Master, in my experience, could actually be someone from the development team. So I've done it in the past where Let's take a quick stretch. I've been talking a lot. I've done it in the past where the Scrum Master actually rotates on the team. So after every iteration, you assign someone new to be the Scrum Master, and now it's their role to make sure that the team works as a cohesive unit. So these are typically the roles that you see in Scrum. That is Scrum in a nutshell. Thanks for watching. Now, I want to talk about how does all of this apply to the community app? Because this is a lot of stuff. Like, this is all the things that we're doing, the framework. How does that apply to how we're building things in the Coding Garden community app? Let's talk about, I guess, the product backlog. We don't really have one. I'll show you our Trello board. And this is probably the closest thing we have to our product backlog or our to-do list here. And we're kind of doing it as we go. And then also the first release of the app is going to be fairly simple. So we've kind of just thought about, okay, what can we get out and into the App Store as soon as possible, and what are the things that it must have? And that's essentially our product backlog. So it's kind of like we're doing our first iteration to actually release the app, and then we'll talk a bit more and refine a bit more about what else is going to go into the app. But if you look at Epic Stories, these are the major things that are going into the app. And if you look at To-Do, these are some of the more fine-grained things that are like broken down for like the front-end team. And as you can see, we actually don't have back-end team stories on here because we're still doing a little bit of planning on specifically like what architecture we're using and things like that. But these two columns here you could consider our backlog. I guess the other thing that wasn't shown here in Scrum is like the Kanban board. This thing, a Scrum task board. And so typically you see it as, okay, this is your backlog. This is what we're working on right now. So anything, sorry, not right now. This is to do. What are we going to do next? You then have in progress. These are things that we're working on now. The way they have their board laid out is after something is development complete, it gets moved into the testing column where testers will, or quality assurance, will test it to make sure that it works, and then it'll get moved into the done column. There are a lot of different ways to organize this, but this is typically known as a Kanban board. It manages work in progress. So you see work flowing from the left to the right, and it also allows you to see things that are getting blocked in a specific column. So that's what we're using. We have the to-do column, the doing column. So these are all things that someone has assigned to them right now and that they're working on. We have our blocked column, so we can recognize when someone is waiting on someone else to finish something. In our process, we've implemented dev complete or pending review column. So after you have finished it, you move it into this column so that one of the more senior members on the team or one of the core contributors can actually review your code and make sure it follows our coding requirements and fits in with the rest of the code base. They will approve it. It gets merged or deployed. At some point, we'll have user testing, and then we have our done column. So in terms of how this fits into Scrum, we're managing work in progress. We kind of have our backlog here. The other thing is daily stand-ups. So because we are a team that is all across the world, it's kind of hard for us to do a daily stand-up at a specific time. So what we've decided is if you look in the Coding Garden community app Discord, we have a specific channel called stand-up. So on any given day, if you're working on the team and you do decide that you're going to implement something, we just ask that you throw a message in here. And it basically keeps everyone else up to date on who's working on what or what's gotten done so far. So you can see there have been updates from Tornado Titan, from Sean, from Spibo. Basically, they answer those three questions. What did you do last time? What are you working on today? And are there any dependencies that are blocking you? And so this channel just allows us to see who's working because we are all somewhat part-time on this thing. No one's doing it full-time. We just ask that as we're working on it, you throw a message in here. So this is a little bit different from a team that's actually working on the same site together, in the same room, and they can have that daily stand-up because this is more of like a part-time thing. So this kind of goes back to in talking about like how is this agile, we're picking and choosing what works for us because we have a very different scenario for how our team works together. So that's what we've decided how to do. Am I missing anything? Please let me know. And Tornado Titan is in the chat. Let's see. Ooh, there's a lot I need to catch up on. Just a second. Yeah, Seven is saying, I don't know, but until now, I'm still confused for how to implement Scrum on my team. I think it's so hard to migrate from my old workflow that really makes developers still suffering. Yeah, I think the thing is you kind of need to have, like, in a way, management buy-in. At the same time, if you're a smaller team and you're kind of just working locally, like maybe you don't have a product owner or maybe you don't have these iteration cycles, like it doesn't hurt as a smaller team to just try and do this internally. Like the business may not know that you're doing this, but it really helps you internally to like get your process down and work as a team really well. And also you'll be able to ask for feedback. Like even if the customer didn't ask you to ask them what they think about a specific thing, if you're doing these tiny little sprints internally, you could do something like that. Nina says, okay, I hope we stop talking about this and write some code. I'm about to write some code. We're going to talk about Git workflow. Ahmed says reuse-oriented software engineering. I'm not familiar with that term. Yeah, and I was just picking random examples. Specifically, I'm talking about all of these things because there are people that will be contributing to the Coding Garden community app. But I also talk from my past experience working on at very large corporations that were trying to implement Agile, and now working at a smaller company that does Agile Scrum. Yep. Hello, Connor. Someone says one thing is a must: Bitcoin wallet. I don't know about that. Yeah. And Isaac is saying we really do need more backend API cards. We kind of do because we've gotten started on the front end. I think we've pretty much done all we can do in the mobile app that doesn't require a backend. So back-end team, we need to get in gear, make sure we decide on stuff, and get started coding. Yeah, and Isaac is Tornado Titan. Hello, Serber, who says CJ is the best. Thank you so much. Ambition says, instead of anyone doing what they want, like in the community app, in a company, how do things get assigned to individuals? It varies. So where I work, we pretty much have a team that that can do front end, back end, like it varies. And so typically we have our like to do or our backlog, and someone will just assign themselves to a specific story. Now, we do have a dedicated iOS team and a dedicated Android team, so I would never assign myself to a story that was like iOS or Android specific. But anything else, the way our team works is we, if you're not working on anything else and there's a story in the to-do column, you can put your name on it. Right now, my team is just like 2 people, so I can just shoot him a message and say, hey, I planned on working on this. You didn't start it on it yet, did you? Or anything. Is like, nope, feel free to pick that story, and then we go from there. So we are very self-organizing in that aspect. You might work at a company where the project manager assigns each story to a specific person. And I guess that could work, but I think one thing about being self-organizing is as a developer, I know what I can do, or like at least what I'm capable of, or I know if I understand a specific story. So if I'm assigned something that I don't understand, it's going to take me a little bit of time to get up to speed before I can even start working on it. So yeah. And when I was running a teaching team, I worked as an instructor at Galvanize. We weren't building software, but we still did like internal, like our team of instructors did a stand-up. We did daily retros, and we essentially had tasks that needed to be assigned, like teach a lesson, give an assessment, run a breakout, all these things that aren't software, but there are still things we had to manage. And so we would have, in a sense, stories that needed to be assigned. And as the lead at the time, I basically just said, okay, team, pick what you want to work on, and I'll pick up anything that's left over. So as a leader, I could have been picky and say, oh, I really want to do that thing. But I also wanted my team to use their strengths and work on what they thought they could work on. And then also, I knew that I was capable of getting up to speed if I didn't know something, so I would kind of just like pick up the slack. You can do it in so many different ways. That's how I've done it in the past. Yeah, and the way we're doing it with Coding Garden is you're essentially just assigning yourself. You can see people's faces on here, at least in the to-do column. Some of these were like multiple people, so we didn't have faces on there, but you can see the little user icon, and that's the specific user that the card is assigned to. Yep. Bob's Paradox, I already use Sprint for my cell service. Why do they have to be involved in my development process? It's a different thing. So I think in this diagram, yeah, this diagram calls them sprints. I tend to call them iterations. It means the same thing. It's a set block of time where you will work on a specific sprint backlog, and then at the end you'll have your retro and then start a new sprint. I call them iterations too, so I might have swapped that word in there without realizing it. Morning, Blounds. Welcome to the stream. Katoli says, congrats on the 10,000 subs. I'm a little bit late. Thank you so much. Better late than never. Oh, yeah, and Khalil is saying, in my company, we use Jira for managing tests. My company uses that as well. Specifically for the Coding Garden app, we just chose Trello because it's free to use. And we have some integrations with GitHub as well. So you'll see on a specific story, like let's take, for instance, one that was completed recently. Actually, this one got merged. I'm going to say this is done. Moving it to done. But if you look at it, we have this GitHub integration, so it links to a specific pull request. And then if you go to that pull request, you can see that it automatically adds a comment. Yeah, it adds a comment that links back to that specific story. So this has nice integration with GitHub. I think you can do that with Jira as well. Jira just costs a bit of money. And there are other tools out there too. There's Pivotal Tracker, other ones that I can't think of. They're all ways of managing this whole Agile thing. Cool. All right, so that was Agile. That was Scrum. I have no bullet points, but we basically talked about what is Scrum, how does it fit into Agile. We talked about roles. We talked about the diagram. All those things. I'm going to edit it down. It's going to be a separate video. Okay, working on teams. Really, this whole video is about working on teams. I don't think there's anything specific I wanted to talk about in working on teams. Maybe I can just use this to talk about how you work on the Coding Garden community app team. That's what I'll do. Okay, so for that, communicate, Discord, Trello, GitHub. Okay, so you've decided to join the Coding Garden community app team. Welcome! This short video. I'm sorry, I'm not gonna do that. Maybe I will. I don't know. But this video is for anyone that has decided to work on the Coding Garden community app. We're going to talk about how do you work on our team. The first thing is the wiki. So if you go to github.com/codinggardencommunity/app-wiki, you can click on the wiki, and it talks about how to get started. We have contribution guidelines. We have the code of conduct. We have our tech stack, and we also have this page on getting involved. So if you're not yet involved and you do want to get involved, check out this page, which talks about how to join the Discord, where the Trello is, where we manage all of our documents in Google Drive. We're using GitHub, talks about our tech stack. Everything you need to know is right here in this document. The next thing is, so you've joined the team. How do we communicate? We communicate mostly on Discord. So once you've joined the Discord, you can see that there are several different channels. We have our planning channel, specific backend and front-end channel, DevOps, design, resources. our stand-up channel. Basically, you just need to communicate. So if you want to work on something, typically you can call that out in either the front end or the back end channel. So you've joined, you've found the Trello board, and you see something in the to-do column that you want to do. First, before moving it in and before putting your name on it, you should throw a message in Discord that says, hey, I'd like to work on this. Is anyone else working on it? Or is there anything else that I need to know? So be sure to do that. And then the other thing about Discord and communicating is using the stand-up channel. So if you did work on something or you're about to work on something, you should throw a message in stand-up. And we always ask that you answer these 3 questions. What did you do last time? It could have been a week or a month ago. Basically, last time that you worked on the Coding Garden community app, what did you do? What are you going to do today? What are you about to start working on? And is there anything blocking you? So you might have picked a specific front-end card, but there is no back-end yet. So you should probably mention that, hey, I'm going to work on this, but the back-end API doesn't exist for this story. So you can do that there. Let's take a quick stretch. Yeah, so use the stand-up channel. And then lastly, we use GitHub. So you can see my videos that I've created or I'm about to create. They're out there on working on GitHub and using feature branch workflow. But essentially, we use GitHub for all of the code that we write. So if you're on the Coding Garden community, you can see that we have a repo for mobile app, a repo for backend, and then eventually a repo for front end. But most of the work is happening on mobile and backend right now. Check out the videos on feature branching workflow and basically how do you work with our GitHub repo. And that'll tell you everything you need to know. I think that's it. Thanks for joining. We'll see you next time. Okay. They got a little weird for a second, but I think that's good. Now let's talk about Git workflow. Okay. So let's first talk about branches. We'll then talk about yeah, so I'm not sure how I want to do this. I do have an image that I created, and maybe I'll talk through that. So let me see. Yeah, and RabbitWorks in the chat is mentioning we are building it as a native mobile app. Yeah, we're using React Native, so it's going to be a totally native app. Okay, so here's a diagram I created. Just a second. I need to go blow my nose. I'll be right back. Stay where you are. Stay where you are. Okay, I'm back. Now I'm going to talk about Git workflow. So there are a lot of different workflows you can use with Git and GitHub. I'm just going to talk specifically about what we've decided to do and show some examples. I do want to bring up another diagram. Yeah, there's this post. So I built that diagram that you just saw, but that was heavily based on this article called A Successful Git Branching Model. And in this article, Vincent lays out basically how things are done. You have your develop branch, which has the latest and greatest features. You have master, which represents what's in production right now, what are users actually using. You have feature branches, which are branched off of developed to implement specific features. And then you also have hotfixes. So a bug is found in production, but you're not ready to release other features into production. So you have a branch specifically for fixing bugs. The way all this works, I'm going to show with actual Git, but I do want to use my diagram here. So the main idea here is that work can be done in parallel. So if you have multiple features that your developers are working on that don't all depend on each other, And even if they do, they could be happening at the same time, but they can happen in parallel. So here we have feature branches. So basically, any piece of work that a developer is going to do, they create a branch based off of the develop branch using a specific name. So in our case, I have ex-002, so this is example 002. If you look on our Trello board, we have a power-up where every single card has a specific identifier. So CA36, CA38, CA48. Each thing has a unique ID. And the idea is when you create a feature branch, you name it specifically after the card that you're working on. So in this case, if I was working on the history page, I would create a feature branch called CA41. Okay, so I created that branch, and then I start work. I work on it, work on it, work on it. And then I create a pull request and say, hey, this work is finished. Please review it and then merge it into the develop branch. So the way we have it set up is develop is the latest and greatest features. This has everything that has ever been written for this app. It's in the develop branch. This may not be what the user sees because we could be working on new features that haven't been deployed yet, but this is everything, latest and greatest. And if you check out any of the GitHub repos, so if you look at app mobile, you can see that actually by default, we have our develop branch as the main branch here. And basically what that means is when someone clones this repo down, they're going to get the develop branch by default. And then also when someone opens a pull request, it'll be against the develop branch by default. And that's what we've chosen to do because we want develop to be all of the latest and greatest things. The next thing is releases. So let's say all three features, A, B, and C, have been merged into develop and they now exist on the develop branch. But we want to deploy. We want to create a release from there. So what I have here is we would branch off of the latest develop, which has ABC, and create a new branch called version 1.0.0. And this is going to be our first version, so we create it, and then merge that into our release branch. So you can see on GitHub, we also have a release, well, we called it staging here. But basically, this is right before we're about to merge into master, which is production only. We bring things here to make sure that everything's working and good to go. And so that would have been merged into staging, and that creates a specific release. Then, after it's been merged into release, we then set up a tag and a merge to get ready to merge into master. And the idea is anything that gets merged into master is ultimately what is deployed. We are going to set up some automation where basically anything that gets brought into master will instantly deploy to the mobile app. So the moment we merge in, anyone that has our mobile app downloaded will get a pop-up that says, hey, version 1.0.2 is ready. Would you like to download it? So we'll have that set up. And these are basically just like swim lanes that protect things from going from one place to the next. So protecting feature branches from develop are code reviews and pull requests. So before anything can be merged in, we make sure that multiple people have eyes on it. And then going from a version branch into release branch, we make sure like, is this working? Is this what we want to actually test as a release? That's good. And then before we merge into master, we make sure, okay, is the production environment ready to accept this latest merge? Like, have we set up all the environment variables? Is everything good to go? Then we can merge it in, and it all works. It's beautiful. It's a wonderful cycle of development. The other thing to mention here are potential bugs or hotfixes. So let's say that, okay, ABC got released, but then we started work on feature D and feature E. And both of those are like ready to be merged into develop, but they're not exactly ready for production just yet. So we don't want to release those. What we can do is create a branch for a specific bug fix. We would branch off the previous release. So this arrow is coming from ABC, but really it would be coming from version 1 release. So we branch off of it, and then we merge that bug fix into it. And that bug fix is what we push into releasing and to master. This allows us to not have to push all of the features because they may not be tested yet. So in this scenario, we're saying that D and E are untested features that were not ready for production yet. So we create a branch that doesn't include those things, includes the fix, and we release that to production. And now our users can benefit from that bug fix. And then after that, that F also got merged into develop. So develop has everything. It has features D and E and the bug fix for F. And then this, eventually we would create a new release, and then ultimately push that to production. This also shows using semantic versioning. If you're not familiar with that, you can check out semver.org. And basically, if you've ever installed anything from NPM, you've seen semantic versioning. It has 3 numbers with 2 dots in it, but it actually means something. So the first number is the major version. And typically, you only ever change the first number if there are breaking changes in your library or in your source code. In our case, we're not really creating something for someone else to consume. Like, we're creating a mobile app, so I'm guessing it's going to stay at version 1 for a while. The minor version, or the second one here, is for new features. So anytime you add something that's not a bug fix or a hot fix, it's a new feature, you increase this number. And then the last one is a patch. So anytime there is a bug fix that's like backwards compatible and it's really just fixing things, you up this specific number. So we're following that specific versioning when we create our release branches and we create our tags. So this is how it all works. I am now going to show it a real live example of how we would do this with GitHub, but I'll do that in the next video. See you there. I'm talking a lot. I didn't mute the mic. Did I mute the mic? What? Do I have to do that all over again? No new version with the hotfix branch created from master. Wait, what? I think what you mentioned, Semjon, I thought I talked about that here. Like, I guess technically, if it is a hotfix, you could branch from master because you know that's what the latest thing that's in production. My diagram is just showing that release branch, the release branch here and master, they all were exactly the same. So technically, no matter where you branched from, you would have gotten the same set of code. But you're right, if it is a bug fix, you probably want to merge branch from master because you know that that's the thing that's in production right now. You're right. Cool. Classical by Metal is saying, I've started an intense coding bootcamp at the start of February. Oh yeah, so you started in February. And found your channel. Really enjoy your Kata vids. They've helped me learn a lot. Struggling with API integration at the moment, though. Glad to hear it. Hopefully I have some videos out there that might help with calling APIs. But yeah, that's awesome. Hello, Danny. Finally managed to catch a live stream. That's awesome. Cool. David says, you're awesome, CJ. Thanks for your knowledge. Hope you eventually can give a seminar here in Calgary, Alberta. That'd be fun. When I was working at my last job, I actually visited, I think we flew into Edmonton. I think it's Alberta. And I did some work out in Cold Lake. Let's look at a map. Wait, no. Edmonton, Canada. There. Yeah, I'm pretty sure I flew in here, and then we drove, like, really, really far north, and it was, like, negative 50 degrees. Yeah, that'd be fun. I don't know, that'd be fun. Do we have a permalink to the community app Discord? I'll say this. Let's not share it in the chat, but if you are on the Coding Garden community Discord, the regular one, there is a channel called Community App, and so if you go to this channel, it has a link to the Discord and a lot of the other things as well. So I kind of want there to be a little bit of barrier because we had talked about in the past, we have some people that in the community app Discord that have gone idle, and we want to maintain that everyone that is in this channel is actively working on the project. So check out Coding Garden Discord, look at the community app channel, and then there's a description of the MVP. You can see some of our Trello notes. You can see a link to the Trello board, all that good stuff. I'm going to hide my screen for a second. I think there's a message in the mods channel. Okay, it's unrelated. Cool. Nino asks, I have a question about testing Express applications with Supertest. Are you familiar with that? I am. I actually did a little bit of testing in one of my API creation series. If you look at the CRUD API with Node.js and Express, in here I do actually set up tests and write some of them. I think it's a little wonky how I get things set up at the beginning because like I forgot to call one thing and then I fix it in the next video, but I talk about it a little bit there. So you can check that out. Also, feel free to ask. All right, now let's do this. So what I want to do is just show how does this work in the real world. So you can point at diagrams all day long, but how does this work? I will show you exactly how it works. So let's actually say I'm going to get started on the frequently asked questions page. So the first thing I'm going to do is in the Coding Garden community app channel, I'm going to go to front end and say, I'm going to start work on the FAQ. Anyone else working on that? Is that okay? I'm going to do an @ here too, just so people can... So I sent the message, I'll wait for a reply, but I don't think anyone else is working on it. Maybe Sean is. Sean, let me know. But I'm going to work on this one. So first thing is I'm going to put my name on it. So I'm going to put CJ because that's me. And this is linked to a specific epic story, but I'm now going to drag this into the doing column. And you can see this specific card has the card number CA-38. So I'm going to use that when I create my feature branch. Let's see in the Discord. All good, however, the backend has not yet been implemented. I think that's okay. I can get started on the basic components, and then once the API is in place, I can hook it up to that. And then in the meantime, I can put that story in the blocked column so people know that we're waiting on the API. I think Sean's going to say something too. Yeah, because if I can't work on that, then maybe I'll work on the history page. Okay, so Sean is saying I'm working on the contributors page, so I'm all good if I want to grab the FAQ. Okay, so that's what I'm going to work on. So let me clean up my tabs here. Okay, so specifically, I am going to be adding a new feature to the app mobile. I just want to check my checklist here. Yeah, so we talked about Git workflow. Now I'm actually going to talk about feature branching, and this relates heavily to Git workflow. So first thing I need to do is clone this repo down. Now, if you are a contributor on the project, so if you are a member of the Coding Garden community GitHub, and you're on the, let's see, on the front-end developer team, you actually have access to push directly to this repo. So if you are a core member here and you, like your GitHub name is on here, you can actually just clone the app mobile directly. You don't need to fork it. So because I am a member, I'm just going to clone it. So I'll grab the URL. Now I'm just going to clone it in here. So I'm going to do a git clone, throw it in. And I have a tool installed in my shell that shows me that I'm actually on the develop branch. But all of the work that I do here, I want to do on a specific feature branch. So because I've decided to work on the FAQ, we see that the FAQ has card number CA-38. So I'm going to check out a branch called CA-38. So for Git, to do that, you can do git checkout -b. -b means you want to create this branch. And I'm going to call it CA-38. Is that right? I'll hit enter. And you'll notice my terminal now tells me I am on feature branch CA-38. Okay, let's start this thing up. I think the first thing I need to do is just install dependencies with Yarn. We probably need a story that where we update the README on how to get started with this thing. But I'll let that run for a second. It's done. And then I should be able to just do yarn start. That'll start up Expo because this is a React Native app. Okay. And then let's try running this on the iOS simulator. Hopefully it works. Building the bundle. Doo-doo-doo-doo. Cool. So the app starts up. I at least know that I'm good there. We right now just have a super basic app. It has a nav bar along the bottom. Got our home page, contributors, and our frequently asked questions page. This is the page that I'm going to be working on. Also, shout out to Isaac, and who's Tornado Titan, but Isaac in the chat, he's the one that implemented this nav bar, so that's pretty cool. But yes, I want to work on the frequently asked questions page. So I know that I specifically am on the CA-38 branch. This is where I'm going to do all of my work. So let's open this up with code. Let's figure out where I'm going to add my code. I believe I'm going to do like components, frequently asked questions, and it's going to go in here somewhere. Right now, this just has that text. I do have my frequently asked questions somewhere. Like, I know eventually these things are going to be coming from an API, but for now, I just want to have them locally so I can actually like write something against it. For the video, I'll probably fast forward through all this coding because you don't care about React Native. But for those of you watching, see me implement some React Native stuff. What was I going to do? Where was I? Yes, frequently asked questions. So in our wiki, I started a frequently asked questions wiki page here. And for those of you that have been watching Coding Garden for a while, you've probably seen these questions before. And so I've started to write them out. And the idea is in the app, once people download it, they can see these frequently asked questions. But the #1 asked question on Coding Garden, what break timer do you use? And for those of you that are wondering, because you might be new to the show, the answer is it's called Timeout by Agile. It's only available for Mac, but there's some for Windows. There's one called ILEO. But I have it set up for every 10 minutes, I take a 10-second micro break. You can actually see it counting down here. So in 2 minutes and 40 seconds, the micro break will pop up. But then every hour, every 60 minutes, I have a 5-minute break set up. But this is the most asked question on Coding Garden. Will the live stream be available as video? Yes, it will. What code editor do you use? What theme are you using in VS Code? What keyboard do you use? I'm just going to post this in the chat right now. Cool. But yeah, basically, I'm going to take all of these. Eventually, these will be stored in an API somewhere, and the front end is going to make a request to get back like this array of questions, show it on the page. But in the meantime, I am just going to hard code these in the app so we can kind of like see them on the page. I'm just going to store it in a variable like questions, let's call it questions. Actually, yeah, we're gonna call it questions. I'm gonna have to format this a little bit, but let's see. If I just paste it in, yeah, we're gonna make like little objects. So a question is gonna have a question, should be like that, and then an answer. Am I really going to do this by hand? Maybe? Can I think of a better way? Let's see. Okay, I think I know what I need to do. So that is a question, that is a question, that is a question, that's a question. Okay, so we'll say object, new line, question, colon, quote, end of the line, quote, comma, beginning of the line, tab, answer, quote, end of the line, quote, new line, curly, comma. Okay. I think we've got ourselves some objects. Let me format it. I do need to escape. Whoa, 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 whoa. There's some single quotes in here, so I need to escape those. That. Yeah, I think we're good. So we got questions, we got answers. And now I'm just going to iterate over these and show them in the app. Oh, that's why I couldn't format it. There was a missing comma. Quick stretch. There we go. Okay, so I have all these questions. I want to iterate over them and show them in the UI. Whoa, some super weird things have happened here. Maybe it doesn't like JSX. Yeah, it really does not like. I think it was like I was missing a comma, so it really didn't know what to do with these things. That's about right. Okay. But we are using this thing called native base, which are pre-built components for React Native. So in their docs, I think I'm going to use like an accordion list. Let's look at their components, or like a collapsible list. Let's see. Is there an accordion? Yeah, accordion. Yeah, so this will be cool. The question can be like the title, and then the answer will be like when you click it open. So let's use that. So I need to bring in all of these things from native base. I'm going to do that in my code here. Well, let's see what I'm missing. Yeah, basically all of these can also be imported from native base. Whoa! Okay, there. I'll just take a step back. The reason I'm doing all of this is because I'm working on a feature branch. So I decided that I was going to work on that specific card. I've created this branch. Now I'm doing all this. This is the dev details. Like, it will vary for every story that happens, but ultimately you've decided to do a story, so you need to actually implement it. That's what's happening now. Cool. So I have those things. Let's see how to show it on the page. We have our container content. Oh, you give it an entire data array. Wow. Let's see what happens. I'm just gonna paste it in. Does it need to be a view? I don't know. I don't know. And then our data array is going to be this. It needs a title and content. So let's actually rename all of these. Whoa, caps lock is on. And then all of the answers need to be called content. Content. So this is called data array. I pass it in here. Let's see what happens. It broke. Oh, refresh. So we go to the FAQ. Oh, wow, that was too easy. So there they are. We can see the frequently asked questions. Is it adding a header? Yeah, it's adding. I'm curious what that header is for, though. So the header is there. Yeah, I definitely want the header because on things like iOS that have this thingy, it will be below it. We might have to verify that. But this is easy enough. Like this is probably not the final version of this, but I just want to show how the pull request process works. So let's say I'm done working on this feature, right? So let me clean up some things. I don't need styles anymore because those aren't being used. I'm going to get rid of these. I'm just going to make sure the code is nice and clean before I create the pull request. And the other thing is this this feature actually needs to call an API, but that API doesn't exist yet. So I'm going to create the pull request, but just know that more work needs to be done. I really just want to show the process. Oh yeah. Khalil is saying I don't need the header. You can use safe area view. Never heard of it. React Native safe area view. To render content within the safe area boundaries of the device, it is currently only applicable to iOS devices with iOS version 11 or later. That's cool. Let's do it. So I think I would need to, I could put my container inside of that. But you know what? Native base, this container in native base might actually do that. Let's find some info about it. What is the container? I really shouldn't be worried about the details here. The main purpose of this was to show a feature branch workflow, but I am curious. Native base container, because it could be, so native base is a component framework, and it could be that they're, well, no, it's not the container, because we saw that the header actually pushes it down. Let's see. Container automatically animates the view to its new position. Common use. Oh, so is that giving me any sort of animation? In a way. Okay. Let's try this safe area view, and then I'll create the pull request. I don't think I'm going to create a background color, but I'm going to give it flex 1. And then I need to import this from React Native, probably. All right, what do we got? Whoa, very nice. And then I guess also I can get rid of the, is the header still in there? Yeah, I got rid of the header. Cool. Thanks for that tip. Was that Khalil? Yeah, Khalil, thanks for the tip. So the safe area view, make sure that it's actually below that little notch on the iOS. So that's cool. Awesome. Okay, so we've made it this far. I have implemented my feature. I now want to make a pull request so that it can get merged back into the app. So the first thing I'll do is push up to GitHub. So because I am a contributor of this repo, I can actually push directly up to origin. So I'm not working with the fork here. I can push to the branch CA-38 on the app mobile repo itself. So let's do that. First, we'll commit everything. Sparkles. Adding frequently asked questions page. Okay, so that committed it. And now I'm going to push up to that branch. So if I do git push origin, so this is where do I want to go. If I do git origin dash v, will that list them? Git, what is it? Git remote, sorry. So list all of my remotes. Right now, origin is app mobile. So this is the main thing. This is the main repo that has like develop, release, and master. But because I'm working on a feature branch, I don't have to worry about accidentally messing up develop or accidentally messing up release or master. So that's my origin. And I want to say git push origin. So I'm pushing to this remote. And the branch I want to push to is CA-38. So push to the origin on the branch CA-38. Go. Okay, so that creates the branch on GitHub and pushes my code up to it, but it doesn't create the pull request. So if we look at the repo, let's look at it. Here it is. If I go to branches, we can now see that there's this new branch, CA-38, but there is no pull request open. So I still technically need to create a pull request so that I can have my code reviewed before it gets merged into develop. So I'm going to click compare and pull request. And typically this will pop up for you on GitHub. If you just pushed up to a branch, it'll say, hey, do you want to make a pull request on that? And I do. So when I'm making a pull request, I want to first be sure that the base is develop. Because if we look back at that image, let me pull up that branching image that I had before. General. Someone said, hi, YouTube. So if we look back at this diagram, where we were was a feature branch. We just created that CA-38 feature branch. We did all of our code stuff, and now we're going to make a request that says, hey, we want to merge this into develop so that eventually it can make it into production. But at this point, we're saying, hey, please merge CA-38 into develop. So if we look at it, our base is develop. We're comparing CA-38. That's the branch that we worked on. One thing I like to do in the pull request is to put the name of the card in brackets. This is not required, but it helps people at a glance to see, oh, I know that pull request is directly related to, where's our Trello board? Directly related to the card on the board that has the ID CA-38. So it really just helps with organizing things. So I've created it. I want to add some notes. So I'll say this adds an accordion to the fact page. We'll say, do not merge. Still waiting on API for dynamic frequently asked question data. Cool. And when you create a pull request, you'll also see your changes down below, and you'll see any commits that were associated with that pull request. Now, I was just showing you an example, so I only have one commit. When you create a pull request, you might actually have like 5 commits that did all of the work for that specific pull request. When we merge it in, we do what's called squashing commits. So even though it took you 5 commits to get there, we squash it down to 1 commit. So that way in the main repo, that 1 commit represents all of the work that you did for that specific feature branch. But we can see all of the changes that we made, and then I can click create pull request. Now, I have this GitHub repo set up so that merging automatically is blocked. So this says at least 1 approving review is required by reviewers with write access. So there are core contributors on this repo that have permissions to review a specific pull request. So that's Sean, Josh, Semjon. I think pretty much anyone that has write access has specific access to approve it. But this is like a protection that I'm not allowed to merge my own pull request. I've basically said, okay, I did this work for this specific feature. Will you please merge it? And someone else has to review it. That actually gets to one of the last things that I wanted to talk about, which was code reviews. We'll talk about that next. But this is the point where a code review would happen. Someone would come in, they'd pull my branch down and just make sure that I followed all of the good coding practices. If they approved it, they could approve it, then it could be merged in. The other thing I want to show is we can actually link this to Trello. So if I go to Trello and I go to this specific card, I can attach a pull request. So I'm going to attach a pull request, and I'll choose the one that I just created. Make sure it's the right repo. It has the name that I chose, so I know that's the one, and I'll attach it. So what's cool about that is now I can click here and go directly to the pull request, and then it automatically adds a comment on GitHub that links me back to the story as well. So that's nice. You get some continuity between the issue and the pull request. That's pretty much it. The next process is to wait for the code review to happen, so I'll have a separate video on that. Thanks for watching. Cool. Let's catch up on the chat. There was a question from Mike about how do I replace things. I'll show you how I do it. So earlier you saw me like paste in all of these questions and then gradually turn it into objects. Maybe that's what you're talking about. I think you're also talking about automatically editing things with the same name. So in VS Code, if you click on something and you press, on a Mac, it's Command D, and I think on Windows it's Control D, or on Linux it's Control D. But if I select this and I press Command D, let's take a break. Yeah. If I press Command D, you'll notice that it selects the next thing that has the word title. And now you see multiple blinking cursors, and I can just start typing anything. Whoa, now. Well, that's not valid JavaScript. You press Escape, and that removes the multiple cursors. Yeah. The other thing is typing in multiple places, and I believe you might have to set that up as a keyboard shortcut, but for me, I have it as Command, and I can click a line, and if I hold Command and click somewhere else, it adds another cursor, and then I can start typing. Whoa! And so what I actually did earlier was insert a quote, and then now your cursor is editing on multiple lines. So if I do Command right, it's going to jump to the end of the line for every single line, and then I can add things there as well. Let's look at my settings JSON. Because here it is, editor multi-cursor modifier. I have this set as Control Command, and so that allows me to hold down Command and click multiple places, and then I just have multiple cursors. I can just start typing anywhere. So that's the setting that you want. If you check out my GitHub, you can see all of my settings. It's Coding Garden, and then there's one called VS Code settings here. And I actually have my all of my settings set up in there, so you can check that out. Cool. Mike asks, can you make a video in the future how to speed up your workflow? Maybe. I did a video a while back on how I set up my Mac, and it was really just talking about all the different tools that I use. So how to speed up your workflow? Drink caffeine. Yerba mate, provided by Gayaki. I'm not sponsored, but I should be. Okay. Yeah, and yeah, Isaac is mentioning, so jumping back to the actual code that we wrote, the safe area view, we should actually just add this to the main app.js component, and then we wouldn't have to have it in multiple places. So that's a good point. We'll definitely do that. And I do want to say, like, any of the contributors that are watching, do not accept my pull request. This is just an example. Cool. Yeah, and everyone told it was git remote. I had a moment of not remembering. I was like, what did I type? I was like, git origin. Yeah, it's git remote because origin is a specific remote, and that will show you all of the remotes that you have. Cool. Someone is telling me to check out screencast mode. Let's see. What does this do? Oh, that's pretty cool. Yeah, so you can see which keys I'm entering. I did not know that was built into VS Code. That's actually pretty cool. Because you can see, yeah, I'm command clicking. And then, let's add some like double quotes. And then option right will jump over individual words. Command right jumps to the end of the line. Yeah, that's pretty cool. I like that. Thanks for that suggestion. Hashtag CJ sold out. I did, but I've been saying for months that Gayaki should sponsor me. I drink at least 2 of these a week. At least. They're really good. Cool. All right, so now let's talk about the code review process. And one of the things I wanted to do was come up with, this will not be the definitive list, but I can at least start coming up with things that a person should check for when they're doing a code review. So the idea is, and we kind of showed it here, I created this request to merge in, but now I want someone to verify the work that I did. They can check and make sure that I followed the linting rules. They can make sure that I implemented things in a sane way. They can make sure that I broke things down into components that should be. There are a lot of different things that they could check for. Ultimately, it's up to them, because on their screen, they literally just have a button that says like approve changes, but they can also add comments. So to try and demonstrate this, I think on the, is it the back end? Yeah, the backend has one pull request. Simjan mentioned this earlier. So this is a separate repo. And Simjan created a pull request to merge our initial release into the staging branch. So he created the version 0.1.0 branch. He is making a pull request to merge that into the staging branch. So if we look back at our diagram, we are basically here. So he created a branch like this, and he's making a request that we merge it into staging or release. So because I am not the person that created this pull request, I actually can add my review. And here I can go add your review. When you click on this, you'll actually get a view where you can comment on any line of code. Now, this specific pull request isn't a code change, it's just creating a release branch. So there aren't really any comments that I can make. But as a part of a code review, you could actually go in and say on this line, we should change the main script. And if I add a single line comment, that comment gets added in. And then when Simjan goes to review what I've posted about this and make changes, he can see all of those comments in line. So this isn't the best example because it's not actually code, but I would go in and add my review. For this case, I would just say everything looks good. Let's merge into staging. And then I click approve. That submits the review. And now you can see we have the ability to merge the pull requests. But one thing that I think we did want to do is squash the commits. Yeah, so the 6 commits from this branch will be combined into 1 commit in the base branch. I like that. Let me double check. Because if we look at staging, where is it? 6 commits behind develop. It does have commits on it. I don't know if Simjan is still watching, but how do you feel about this? Should merges into the staging be squashed, or should we keep those commits? Now, I would think we would maybe keep those commits because these are most likely each a feature that was done. I don't know, you tell me. But once I've decided, I can click merge. That merges it into staging. If we had workflow automation set up, it could automatically deploy to the staging environment. I don't think we have that set up just yet, but that's basically how that would work. One thing I want to take time to do is to come up with a list of all the things that I would check for in a code review. So let's do that now. Code reviews. Okay. First, linter passes. So we have ESLint Airbnb set up. So yeah, consistent indentation and code style. Basically, the linter should automatically check that for us. But as part of the code review, if I catch anything, I can make a note of that. The other thing is ignored linting rules are justified. So with ESLint, it is possible to turn off a specific rule for an entire file or for a specific line. And part of my code review, I just want to make sure if we see any linter warnings that are ignored, the person has a very good reason for that. So I think we can see an example in the app mobile code base of somewhere where we ignored linter rules, and I'll show that. I believe it's source and then like app.js. Yeah, like right here. This is enabling a rule about having functions with underscores in them. It's saying only use camel case. In this case, this is a built-in React component. So we wanted to allow camel case for that one specific line. In this case, we actually do want to require these in line instead of at the top of the file, because that will allow the app to show the loading screen a little bit faster and then load the fonts in the background. And so we actually disabled the global require rule for these specific lines. But we had very good reasons to do that. So part of a code review is I would want to make sure that anyone that ignored rules had a very good reason for doing it. So I would make a comment in asking them why they're ignoring that rule. Cool. Yeah, and so Simjon is clarifying, no squashes for the main branches, squashing only for the feature branches. That makes absolute sense, because you would probably still want your feature branches to be available in the staging or in the release branches in the event that you wanted to roll back. So in this case, you saw me give him the review. I'm just going to click merge pull request. I'm going to confirm it. And then after that has happened, we have the option to delete the branch. This is another question for you, Simjon. Should we delete the version branches, or should we actually leave those there for the life of the project? My thought is we leave them just in case we ever need to roll back to a specific version. That said, if you included a tag, we can roll back to a specific tag. I don't know. You tell me. Cool. But let's think about other things for code reviews. Good variable names. No abbreviations. No 2-3 letter abbreviations. Also, they're not overly descriptive. It's not like a 30, 40 character long variable name. But these are all either things we agree on as a team or just like objective things that, sure, the code works, but to make sure that we have a consistent, good code base, these are things we would want to check for in the code review. What else? Let's say specific to React, state in component is justified. Really just like no unnecessary. How do you spell unnecessary? Unnecessary? Necessary? I'm just going to leave that one off. But basically, in our React components, we want to make sure that state is typically only at the top and then is like passed down to lower level components. But in some cases, it might actually make sense to have state at a lower level. So we want to make sure that that is justified. And Isaac has a really good example of like bad variable names. I'm going to copy and paste this. This variable holds the number 1 and does not change. This is way too much. It's way too descriptive. So I don't know. You don't want that. What are some other things? I'd also say like not only good prop names, but not only good variable names, but good prop names. So in React, props are how you pass data down from one component to the other. And I think when we're analyzing variable names, we should be looking at prop names as well, because that's that. I think we'll probably add this to our linting rules, but let's say all this.state and this.props are destructured. We can see an example of that in the community app, where at the top of the function, you destructure the things that you need from state, and then you just use their names in the render function, versus having this.state.that, this.state.that, this.state.that everywhere. It makes the code a little bit easier to read and understand. Can anyone think of other things? This is an interesting point from JT, who says, aren't consts supposed to be all uppercase? That is really just like a preference. I definitely, when I was coding like in C# or in Java or in C, that was a convention where constants used throughout the application are stored in all capital letters, which helps denote that they are constants. But in JavaScript, you typically see people using consts anywhere where they know that variable is not going to be modified, even if it's not like a global app constant. So we see them where people not all capitalizing them everywhere that they use them. Yeah. Let's take a break. Oh yeah, Aaron is saying ES5 functions versus arrow functions. It's actually in the Airbnb linting rule to prefer arrow functions. So that should be handled in here. And let me just try an example. So like if I, yeah, if I tried to do just like a inline data array dot for each and tried to use a real function, I think it'll complain. Yeah. Hi. This says unexpected unnamed function, and then there's another linter rule we have, which is prefer arrow callback. So even if I gave this a name, thingy, the linter will still yell at you and says prefer arrow callback. So built into the linter is you should be using arrow functions rather than regular functions. So I won't write that as a new rule. Oh yeah, Dirkarel is saying good file split. So we'll say components are broken down at the appropriate level. We'll say generally highly reusable. I know that components aren't always reusable. It just helps to break them down like when you're structuring your app. But for some things, it can be reused in a lot of places. So I think part of the code review process would be to look at something and say, should that be broken down into something that's reusable? Or, oh, hey, did you see that in the lib folder or the shared folder, we already have a component that does something very similar? You should just use that instead. So this is something we should definitely check for. Yeah, in terms of comments, I think my rule on this is, we'll say ambiguous or confusing code is commented. I do not believe in commenting all code because you probably heard this a lot, but in coding, typically the code will get updated, but the comments won't get updated, and so they go out of sync. I also believe that code itself should be self-explanatory in the variable names that you use and in how you code it. You shouldn't try to be clever about things. At the end of the day, when you write code, you're communicating to other developers, so it should be as clear as possible. But there are cases where you can try to write it as clear as you'd like, but it still looks very weird, or to someone that comes along later, it may not make that much sense. And in those places, I would like to see code comments. Cool. Nino J is saying, are you going to use hooks? I would say don't. I'm not going to make it a requirement, but if someone has a functional component and all of a sudden it needs state, maybe we'll use hooks. So something to think about. Yeah, I don't think we agreed on it, but I think we are doing camel casing, and that is in the linter. So Rabbitworks is saying, what is the naming convention for folders and multi-word folders? I think they should also be in camel case. So the way we have our components broken down is we have a source directory, a components directory, and then we have top-level directories that actually have more components inside of them, but the components in each of those directories are specific to that section of the app. So right now it's pretty basic. In the future, it could get a little more complex. And then we also have shared, which includes components that might be used in multiple places in the app. As far as multi-word folders, I think they should be camel cased. Yeah. Simjohn is telling me to check the Discord channel. Do we want to merge to master with a new pull request? Or do we want to only move the label? Oh, that's a good point. Release pull request should make sure that the package version was changed. But yeah, I think we should. I think it's possible to can you do it on GitHub where you merge into a branch, but it doesn't show the merge commit? It just merges it directly. If that's the case, that's how I would want to do it. Is that rebasing? I don't know, but that's my answer to that. But also, these are release-specific code review checklist. So we want to make sure that the package version is correctly incremented. Let's take a quick break. Yeah, so package version is correctly incremented. Tag is created. Those are a few things that we'll need to check. This list, and actually we should probably do a separate backend and front end one, because when I talk about state or props, that's like front end specific. Yeah, so when we're doing a code review, whether it's front end or back end, these are all things that we're going to be looking for. But when it's React specific, these are things we'll be looking for. When it's a release, these are things we'll need to check for. There are other things. I'm going to look up just some checklists that people have made online, because I know there are some. Let's do like code review checklist. Yeah, and these are more of like bigger questions and things you'd have to look at a lot of the code to be able to analyze. Things like, is the code scalable to support huge number of users? Is security taken care of? Is the code maintainable easily? In some of the questions we've come up with, these actually help with maintainability. Things like breaking down components, only using state when you need to. Let's add this though. Is security taken into account? It may not apply to every pull request. Like in the one that I just did, I'm basically just showing questions and answers. So it's not really affecting the security of users or anything, or even our app itself. But it's always important to just at least think about that when you're reviewing the code. So that's cool. Is the performance acceptable with huge data? I don't think that's something that we care about. Is the code meeting the non-functional requirements, which are these things that we're talking about? Single responsibility principle, open-close principle. So these are design patterns that they're talking specifically about. Don't know if I want to do that. Let's look at these other lists. Is the function or class too big? Let's also say... I'll be general about it. Functions are appropriately broken down. I think some people can get a bit dogmatic about breaking down functions, whereas like no function should be longer than 4 lines, and if it gets longer, then you should break it down. But what people have found is when you start breaking it down like that, it gets very hard for people that come along later to follow your code, because they have to look at this function, which calls this function, which calls this function. So I'm going to say appropriately broken down. And that's up to the reviewer to decide, but I like to take a more pragmatic approach. Like, is it is the function that you broke down actually reusable anywhere? Do we use it in multiple places? Does it make sense to break it down so that it can be reused? Cool. Is the code duplicated more than twice? I really like that one because it really helps us refactor and write something that is reusable. So, is the code duplicated more than twice? And like some people have a rule like, okay, we can copy and paste this once, but the moment we go to copy and paste this code a third time, we need to write a function to do this instead of copying and pasting. Cool. That's that same image we saw earlier. Let's look at some other examples. Does the code completely and correctly implement the design? These are other questions to ask. Like, let's just say, like to me, these are more of like functional requirements and maybe even something that might be done by a quality assurance team. But I think it should be part of the code review process as well. Did you meet all of the acceptance criteria in the card? So if we look on Trello, some of our cards don't actually have that much detail. But if you look at the one that like Sean is working on, the contributors list, this has a bit more detail. It says we need this data for each person, their name, avatar, what dev teams that they're on. The list should include the name and avatar. Again, we're not that great about acceptance criteria right now, but typically, and in larger teams and more official situations, your card will have very specific acceptance criteria on it. So part of the code review could be, is the work that has the work that you've done met all of the acceptance criteria that is on the card? So does the work complete all acceptance criteria? Cool. Oh yeah, Simjohn is asking, what about writing tests for the implemented functionality? I like that. So it is any new functionality appropriately covered by tests? And again, I say appropriately. It's up to the reviewer. I want to be pragmatic about it. I'm not going to require that every single line of code in the code base has a test on it. I'm only going to require that the things that need to be tested are tested. Now, of course, that is objective. Like for me, I may request less tests than somebody else, but I'm going to leave it open enough that it's really up to the reviewer to decide. Yeah, Rabbitworks is saying talk about user stories. I think I will, and that's something I didn't talk about earlier, but I'll do a separate video on it. So let's say user stories and acceptance criteria. Definitely, that's something I will talk about. Okay, what else? Does it conform to the coding standards? I think that's something that's satisfied by like linting rules. Is the code well structured, consistent in style, and consistently formatted? Are there any uncalled or unneeded procedures or any unreachable code? Again, our linter is going to catch that. Are there any leftover stubs or test routines in the code? Let's say no unnecessary or unused tests. I tried to spell unnecessary earlier. I couldn't. I don't know how to spell unnecessary. Unnecessary. There we go. No unnecessary or unused tests. We'll also say, does the test suite pass? We'll run the test locally after pulling down the features, the changes for that feature, and make sure that the tests still pass. What else? Testability. Let's say, is the code written in an easily testable way? Definitely something to take into account. What else? I think this is a pretty good list. This just so that as a reviewer I don't forget things. Like when I'm doing a code review, I can pull up this list and just go line by line and make sure that everything in that pull request satisfies these specific things. Are all comments consistent with the code? I think that's another point to make. Where do I have comments? Ambiguous or confusing code is commented. Changed. Let's say comments are updated. Comments are updated if needed for changed code. So if they updated a piece of code that was commented, did they also update the comments? That's something good to look for. Someone was trying to tell me how to spell unnecessary. I think I got it. I just copied and pasted it. Unnecessary. Isaac is saying the linter does not like having a FSC, stateless functional component. Do you mean SFC in an arrow function? It actually is doable. And technically this one should have been, yeah, I'll show you how this would be an arrow function. We would say const fac equals an arrow function. And then if we do that, we can actually get rid of the return. So it's just this. So that's fac. And then we do export default fac. So the linter should be okay with that. This is my preferred way of writing a stateless functional component. Use an arrow function and then export it down at the bottom. Yeah. And actually, I like that. So I'm going to push that up. This is something else to mention. If you've received a code review or you need to make a change to a pull request you've already made, all you have to do is just push back up to that branch. So I'm going to make a new commit here because I've changed how I wrote this functional component. So I'm just going to add it, commit it, change stateless functional component to arrow function. And then I'm going to do git push origin branch. And now when I push up, my pull request will actually reflect that I've pushed up to that branch. So if I look at pull requests, see this here, we can see that my latest commit also shows up there as well. Cool. Yeah, Katoli is mentioning a simple tutorial for setting up linter and prettier. I could do that. The auto documenter? What is that? We'll use comments to generate itself. Oh, that's, I mean, we haven't talked about that for at least for front-end code. For the back end, we are going to have some sort of documentation generation. I think we're going to be using API doc, which is a specific format for commenting your functions, your API functions. And then after you have all of them commented, you can generate documentation from those comments. So we are going to do that on the back end. I don't know if it makes as much sense to do it on the front end because this isn't really a reusable library. It is just a mobile app. But yeah. Okay, anything else to add to my code review checklist? And I think also this is like an ever-changing list. Like this is all I could come up with in the past 20 minutes that I've been talking about it, but every project is different. As we code in the project, we might see things a lot in every code review that we have to do, so we would add it to the list to make sure that in a future review, at least someone's thought about it before going into the code review. Yeah, there are defensive programming ones. I think I'm okay with this list for now. We can modify it later, and as we do more and more code reviews, we're going to learn more about how we like to code. So I'm going to add these code review things to our wiki. Wiki. Code review checklist. General. Testing. Cool. Yeah. So this wiki is a living, breathing document. As we come up with more things, we'll add more questions. But basically, when someone goes to do a code review, so let's say Sean or Isaac or Simjohn sit down to review this pull request that I just made. When they go into review mode, they're going to want to have this checklist nearby. And as they look at my code, make sure that they can check off all of these boxes. So that's code reviews. What's next? Yeah, let's talk about user stories and acceptance criteria. And just in general, like, what is a user story? What is acceptance criteria? Yeah, so earlier when I was talking about Agile and Scrum, I didn't mention user stories at all, but user stories are a pretty common thing that you see for one, Scrum teams. Like typically the backlog is made up of user stories, and there is like an Agile process for coming up with user roles and user stories. So it is a common thing that you'll see out there, and we're like roughly following that. Like I said, things are very open with this project, especially because it's not that official, but we're trying to do things in a somewhat agile way. And we are using the user story format. So if you look at our Trello board, you can see under our epic stories, we have these in the user story format. So if you've ever heard anything read this way, or you've seen things written this way, this is the user story format. As a user, I want an easy way of accessing all the sections of the app. That's the epic story. That's the thing where anything that relates to that is going to be underneath this. And then this can be broken down further. And so there was a specific task, set up component layout and icon navbar. This itself was not formatted in the user story way, but it was kind of like a section of this bigger user story. Some other ones we have: as a user, I want to see all contributors of the project. As a user, I want to see a welcoming splash page when I open the app. As a user, I want to see a list of frequently asked questions and answers. So user stories are written from the perspective of an end user. The person who is going to be using the mobile app, that is the user. And we write these stories from their perspective. And this, I guess, relates to Agile or is Agile because you're focusing on what the customer wants. It's not what the development team wants. It's not what the business wants if the business is not the customer. At the end of the day, it is what does the customer need or want from this piece of software. So they're written in that style. And typically inside of a story, you have what are called acceptance criteria. And these are all the things that must be satisfied that say, if those are satisfied, this story is done or can be marked as done. So in our code review checklist, when I talked about does the work complete all acceptance criteria, I would want to make sure that if I go in and there is a checklist, like let's find one that has a checklist. And typically that's how you might see acceptance criteria, is like a checklist of things. These were more like tasks and administrivia, so they weren't exactly user stories, but Trello does support having checklists in here, and that's typically how I see acceptance criteria, where I can go line by line, and if I've done everything correctly, I can say that I have met all of the acceptance criteria. Like the way I coded it allows all of these specific things to be done. And so good user stories and good acceptance criteria are crucial to being able to like communicate as a team, because as a product owner, if they didn't mention all of the acceptance criteria, like if they did not say everything that the customer wanted and put it down in that card, there's a possibility that the developer won't know the full story. They'll implement something as they understand it, but by the time it makes it to product, they'll be like, whoa, this is not what we meant. Well, maybe we're missing some acceptance criteria. So it really is like a communication tool. And People have said different things on how to write user stories. There's this acronym called INVEST, which basically gives you guidelines for writing user stories. So is it independent of all other stories? So user stories should be able to stand alone. I should be able to take a user story and implement that, and it shouldn't have multiple features inside of it. Negotiable. It's not a specific contract for features. So it is at a high level describes what should be done, but doesn't describe exactly how it should be done in terms of like how the code should be implemented. It is valuable. That means once the story is complete, it's going to bring value to the customer, to this piece of software. It is estimable. So you want your stories to be small enough that you can estimate how long they're going to take to be done. If they are too big, then they're not of any use because there's so much work that's going to need to go into it that it just gets lost all under that one story. That story needs to be broken down into further smaller stories so that it can be estimated. Small so that it will fit within an iteration, and testable. So in principle, even if there isn't a test for it yet, we should be able to test that this feature, once implemented, passes all of the acceptance criteria and can show that that thing is specifically done. So I'll say on the Coding Garden project, we're a little loosey-goosey with user stories and acceptance criteria, mainly because it's a fairly small team. We're all developers, and we're also just figuring all this out as we go. So there's that. But on larger teams or more like specific product teams, you're definitely going to want to get more fine-grained and very specific about your user stories and acceptance criteria than we're doing on the Coding Garden app. So that's a little bit about user stories, acceptance criteria. Yeah, it's a thing. Cool. Yeah, and that's a good point, Simjohn, in terms of when we create a release branch, technically it needs to be merged back into develop as well, because that will put the version tag and the versioning of the package JSON back into the develop branch, which needs to happen. Yeah. Okay, I talked about a lot of stuff. I'm going to go back and I'm going to edit this video down. We're going to have an Agile video. We're going to have a Scrum video. We're going to have a community app video. We're going to have a Git workflow video. We're going to have a how do you actually do feature branching video. Yeah, all of it. I'm going to edit it down. It's going to be a thing. I think that's it. Can anyone think of anything else that I should maybe mention about working specifically on the community app project? Yeah, I mean, I think I'll do a quick note about people that aren't on the contributors team and that do want to contribute. Okay. So, you want to contribute to the Coding Garden community app. How do you do it? First, the very first thing you should do is join the Discord. So, if you're on the main Discord, you can check out the community app channel. It talks about how to join it. Once you're in, then you can start asking questions. The main thing is if you see something on the Trello board that you want to start working on, throw a message about it in front end or back end or the relevant channel so that other people can know that you're interested in working on that thing. Second, we can then get you added to the Trello board. So right now, our Trello board is public. Anyone can view it, but we have the team members locked down. If you know that you're going to have time and you do want to contribute on this, we can get your name added so that we can actually show your face on a specific card. So the first step, though, is to get into the Discord and start talking and let us know that you're interested in working on that specific thing. After that, once we add you to the Trello board, you'll have your face on here. Well, you'll also add you as a contributor on the GitHub repo so you can just create branches directly. But in the meantime, so let's say you want to contribute, you've messaged, but you haven't gotten GitHub access just yet. That is where you can actually use a fork and still continue working anyways. So in an earlier video, I showed how to do feature branch workflow where you have direct access to the repo. But if you want to create a feature branch and you don't have access to the repo, you can first create a fork. Once you create a fork, that creates a direct copy on your GitHub account that you have full access to. You could then create the feature branch from there, and then you could take that feature branch and pull request it against this repo. The flow would work exactly the same. The only difference is the pull request is coming from a fork rather than the repo itself. I only suggest you do that if for some reason you don't have access to the GitHub, but if you get access to the Discord and you're communicating, we'll get you access so that you actually can create a feature branch directly on the GitHub repo. So that's it. That's how to get involved. Thanks for watching. I'm talking fast. All right, I think that's pretty much everything I can cover. Take a quick break, quick stretch, and then I'll make sure I'm not missing anything. Yeah, and to your note, Simjon, I don't want to push to master directly, because I don't think you can with the branch protections that we have set up. Oof. That's one last thing I'll mention. So, and I'll probably edit this in somewhere to the older video. So, I mentioned that in this diagram, we basically have specific lanes. You have the develop branch. Nothing can go in there unless it is code reviewed. So a pull request has to happen, and it must be approved before it can be merged. Same thing with creating a release branch. Someone has to approve it. Same thing with merging into release or staging. Someone has to approve it. And same thing with merging into master. Someone has to approve it. We actually have GitHub rules set up where no one, absolutely no one can push directly to develop. And no one can push directly to release. And no one can push directly to master. To get code into those branches, you have to create a pull request. There has to be some user oversight. So I'll show you how we set that up. So on GitHub, if you go into settings and then you click on branches, you can create branch protection rules. And basically what these allow you to do is to protect a specific branch from allowing people to just push directly to it or overwrite to it. I actually have this joke. I'm going to show it real quick. Wait. Okay. I have to find it. Just a second. It'll be worth it, I swear. Oh yeah. Here it is. If you commit directly to master, you're gonna have a bad time. But if you set up these rules, no one can commit directly to master. And typically when you're working on a team, you don't want to commit things directly to master because you want there to be some oversight. You want to make sure that everyone approves of those changes before they get into the master branch. So on GitHub, you can create these protection rules. And let's just, for example, look at the rules for master. And here we say, pull requests require at least one approving review before they can be merged into the branch. It should be from code owners, so we have specific users that have the code owner role. And we also have it set up that certain users are actually allowed to dismiss pull requests, or allowed to dismiss the review. So myself, because I'm the super ultimate administrator man, and also Simjon, who does a lot of the DevOps work, we're allowed to just directly merge into those things if we deem it necessary. But anyone else must have at least one approving review. And this also allows us to actually create the release branches because Well, I think we don't have any protections on like the V1 branches, but we do have protection on staging. But basically, once you've set this rule up, if someone tries to push directly to master, Git won't even let them. Like, it'll say, you cannot do this, you do not have the rights, you must open a pull request. So that's how we have that set up. And it's really great because it prevents us from making mistakes. It prevents us from overwriting code without having the proper oversight. So that's branch protection. That's how it plays into this whole feature branch workflow. Thanks for watching. Katoli is telling me to check the Gardener's channel. I will do it. I will do it right now. Okay. Yes, I agree. Have we gotten a lot of new people? We don't have any automation or any bot set up on the community app Discord just yet, so we're definitely going to have to set that up. Cool. All right, I think that's all I have for you. I am going to set a timer for 3 minutes. If anyone has any lingering questions, concerns, criticisms, just things that they want to know, you have 3 minutes to ask me. I'm also going to rest my voice because I've been like talking for 2.5 hours now. I believe it's like 10 degrees outside. 10 degrees Fahrenheit. What is 10 degrees Fahrenheit and Celsius? It is negative 12 degrees Celsius in the city that I live in today. So I don't plan on going outside. I'm just going to hang out. Cool. Oh, and Katoli mentions they are going to do the bot for the community app Discord. That's good. Worlds has a comment. They're saying, this project is very realistic. The only thing missing is a head manager that takes all of the credit and does none of the work. Yeah. And what I like about this is we're all coders. Like, I think there's some dedicated design people as well, but they might even write some code. But we're working as a team. We're just a bunch of developers making an app, doing the best we can, working together. It really is a, what's the word? A testament to self-organizing teams. Like, we don't really need a project manager. Like, in a way, I'm the project manager, but I'm really just the person that makes the final decision on anything. I'm not pushing any decisions. Like, I'm open to feedback and criticism and other ways of working, you know, so. Cool. And I think Isaac opened a new pull request. So this is something, I guess this is something cool to show because I'm not the person that made this pull request. I can actually go in and review it. Yeah, so this person updated all single file components to be arrow functions rather than named functions to match the desired stylings. So cool. Alexander approved them. So technically Alexander could have merged in, but I'm going to do a quick review just to show you how the review process works on GitHub. So this is an open pull request. I can click on files, changes, and then I can say, I think I can, there's somewhere where I can like start the review. Yeah, add my review. And then I can add individual comments. So you can see that Twitface, so I think is also Andrew Lane, added a specific comment and says, did you remove the return on purpose? Because if you did, you actually need to remove the curly braces. So I'm actually going to pull this code down locally. So they created a branch called CA55. And so this is another way of showing how would I do that code review if I'm just running things locally. So right now I don't have any changes. I'm going to do a git fetch. That will bring down all of the branches that have been created on origin, and now I can switch to it. So I'm going to do git checkout CA55. So this is going to check out the specific branch that Isaac has made. And now I can look at it locally. I know Expo or like the React Native runner doesn't like all of those changes happening at the same time. So I'm just going to restart it. It's going to fire up. Let's run it in the simulator. Oh no! Yeah, violation home. Nothing was returned from render. So this is something that that we do want to add in the review. If we look at home, when you change something to a single file component, you want to remove the return, you cannot have curly braces. So this actually needs to look like that in order to be valid. So Isaac will need to make an update. But I just wanted to run it locally to make sure that that's what the code looked like. And then in my review, I can add it there. Let's see. Where are we? Here. Please remove curly braces to be able to leave off return. Applies to all other functions as well. I can click start a review. This will let me add more comments. I think it's the same thing for all of these. We need to just make sure that we get rid of the curly braces. For this one, curly braces do not need to go away because we are doing some destructuring before we're doing the return. Same thing here. Cool. And so now that I have my changes in, I can say, please see comments above and update. And then I'll say request changes. And then once I've submitted my review, Isaac will need to push up a new commit that addresses the comments that I made. And once you push them up, I can do a second review to make sure that they still satisfy, the code still works and it satisfies all the requirements and all that good stuff. So Isaac will need to check that out. All right, I think I'm gonna go. Someone said it's 68 degrees in Louisiana. It's like 10 degrees here. Rand is mentioning, did you do environments? I didn't. That's actually a good point. I'll just touch on them because we haven't really gotten all of that set up just yet. But the purpose of this whole Git workflow thing and having the different branches is each of those could be a different environment that we deploy to. So if we look at this diagram, we could actually, when anything is merged into the develop branch, automatically deploy it to our development deployment environment. Like we could actually push this to the web. It'll have a special URL that really only the developers or the testing team know about. So that way we can actually test the app as it is deployed out in the real world, but it's not actually production. It's like development.codinggarden.app. And then the other thing is staging. So staging is a totally separate environment where we can make sure that what we're about to release actually works out in the real world. So typically, staging is an exact copy of the production environment. It's the same type of Linux server, the same image, or it's the same Docker container or Docker host, or we're using the same type of database. It's just a separate one that is specifically only for staging. And when we merge into the staging branch, we can have automation set up that automatically deploys that out to the web. And then the same thing with master. So what we're saying is master is in line with our production environment. So anytime something gets merged into master, that's what's going to get pushed out for the world to see, and that's what is actually in production. We don't have that automation set up just yet. Simjon is going to be working on that. I'm going to help him out with that because I'm like getting all the hosting accounts for stuff. But all of this code reviews before we merge, it highly, highly relates to our environments because we're going to set it up so that when things are merged in, it automatically deploys. So these checkpoints, we really want to make sure that the code is good, it's working, it passes the tests before we allow it to be deployed into that environment. But yeah, that's at least what I wanted to mention on environments. Thanks for bringing it up, Ran. I keep saying I'm going to go. I think I'm going to go. My mouse share stopped working. Cool. Yeah, Isaac forgot to remove the curlies, but it was a perfect use case or perfect example of me adding a review and then saying that, hey, you need to make changes for this before I accept it. Yeah, cool. Yeah, and Contoli is saying, what about making an insiders or beta version of the app? Absolutely, and these environments play into that as well. We can have it set up where we can give out a build of the app that's pointed directly at development. So it's the latest and greatest features, but as a tester, you're allowed to use it. And then we could also have like the beta version or staging version, which is pointed at our staging environment, that has the latest release, but which may not have made it to production just yet. But absolutely, once we've set up those environments, we can give someone an app that isn't the one that's in the App Store. It just has like the latest features or something like that. Okay. I think that's it. I'm gonna go now. This was fun. I'm gonna edit it down. It's gonna be great. It's gonna be shorter. It'll be more succinct, less drinking of the yerba mate, less rambling. So tune in for those. This is an exciting project. Thanks to all the main contributors for helping out and getting this thing started. And then also, for anyone out there like starting a new job or wants to know how this whole Agile thing or this feature branch workflow thing works, those videos will be helpful for you as well. I think that's it. Thanks for watching. Wherever you are in the world, have a wonderful morning, afternoon, evening, or night. Until next time, here's this.